These are the graves of 60 iconic figures: actors, musicians, athletes, comedians, and cultural legends. John Belushi was buried at Abels Hill Cemetery in Chilmark, Massachusetts, after he died on March 5, 1982, at age 33 from a speedball overdose at the Chateau Marmont. His headstone drew such relentless vandalism from hard-partying fans that his wife Judith quietly had his remains moved to an undisclosed location within the same cemetery. And a headstone bearing his name still stands, but his body is not beneath it. Only a handful of people have ever known exactly where he rests. John Wayne was buried without a marker at Pacific View Memorial Park in Newport Beach, California, after he died on June 11, 1979, at age 72 from stomach cancer. His family deliberately left the grave unmarked for 19 years to prevent it from becoming a shrine and disturbing neighboring plots. A small bronze plaque was finally added in 1998. His grave had been an open secret among locals for nearly 2 decades before any public acknowledgement was placed on the ground. Roy Orbison was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California, after he died on December 6, 1988, at age 52 from a heart attack. His family initially intended to relocate him and never got around to placing a headstone, a temporary arrangement that stretched into years. He lies in the same cemetery as Marilyn Monroe and Natalie Wood, without a single word on the ground above him. His son Alex later acknowledged, "It's not intentional, it just kept getting pushed to the back burner." Frank Zappa was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California, after he died on December 4, 1993, at age 52 from prostate cancer. His grave was left unmarked by family choice. When asked in a late interview how he wanted to be remembered, Zappa replied, "It's not important to even be remembered. He is buried in the same section as Roy Orbison and George C. Scott, 3 of the most recognizable names in their respective fields. They're each lying beneath ground that offers the visitor no confirmation they are even there." George C. Scott was buried at an unspecified location within Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California, after he died on September 22, 1999, at age 71 from an abdominal aortic aneurysm. The man who famously refused the Academy Award for Best Actor for Patton in 1971, calling the Oscars a meat parade, extended his contempt for celebrity into death. His grave bears no marker, no headstone, and no public designation. The cemetery confirms his burial, but will not disclose the location. Steve Jobs was buried at Alta Mesa Memorial Park in Palo Alto, California, after he died on October 5, 2011, at age 56 from pancreatic cancer. His family chose to keep the exact location of his grave private, and no marker was placed. Fans nonetheless make pilgrimages to the cemetery and leave notes and Apple devices throughout the grounds, unsure of where exactly the man who defined the modern smartphone rests. The cemetery staff will not confirm the plot location to visitors. Bessie Smith was buried at Mount Lawn Cemetery in Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania, after she died on September 26, 1937, at age 43 from injuries sustained in a car crash in Mississippi. Her grave went without a headstone for 33 years because her estranged husband refused to pay for one. It was Janis Joplin, then at the peak of her own career and just 2 months before her own death, who paid for the headstone that now reads, "The greatest blues singer in the world will never stop singing." Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was buried in an unmarked communal grave at St. Mark's Cemetery outside Vienna, Austria, after he died on December 5, 1791, at age 35. In late 18th century Vienna, marked individual graves were a luxury reserved for the upper classes. Mozart died with significant debts, and his burial followed standard practice for his economic position at the time. But his exact location within the cemetery has never been confirmed. The memorial stone that stands at St. Mark's today marks only the approximate area, not the actual grave. Michael Jackson was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, after he died on June 25, 2009, at age 50 from acute propofol and benzodiazepine intoxication. His actual burial location within the Great Mausoleum is not publicly disclosed, the section inaccessible to the general public. The cemetery does not confirm the specific location to visitors, and the mausoleum wing where he rests is closed. He lies in one of the most secure and private sections of one of the most visited cemeteries in California. Kasem was buried at Vestre Gravlund Cemetery in Oslo, Norway, after he died on June 15, 2014, at age 82 from Lewy body dementia. His burial in Norway, the country where his wife Jan's family had roots, was the result of a prolonged and acrimonious custody battle between Jan and Kasem's children from his first marriage that began while he was still alive and continued after his death. His grave in Oslo went without a headstone for years as the legal and family disputes continued unresolved across 2 continents. H.P. Lovecraft was buried at Swan Point Cemetery in Providence, Rhode Island, after he died on March 15, 1937, at age 46 from intestinal cancer and Bright's disease. For decades, his grave at Swan Point was marked only by a family monument that did not bear his name. In 1977, a group of fans raised money to place a dedicated headstone inscribed with his name, the dates of his life, and the phrase "I am Providence," a line from one of his letters. Before that stone was placed, the most influential horror writer of the 20th century lay in a grave that gave no indication of who was beneath it. Fred Gwynne was buried in an unmarked grave at a private cemetery in Finksburg, Maryland, after he died on July 2, 1993, at age 66 from pancreatic cancer. The actor best known for playing Herman Munster in The Munsters deliberately chose an unmarked burial, a man who had spent years playing one of television's most recognizable faces, ending his life in deliberate anonymity. His grave has remained unmarked, his location within the cemetery known to family, but offering visitors no confirmation of who is buried there. Jim Morrison was buried at Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, France, after he died on July 3, 1971, at age 27 from heart failure in a Paris bathtub. His grave became one of the most visited and most vandalized in the world, the surrounding tombstones defaced by decades of fans carving their names and leaving bottles of alcohol. The cemetery authorities at various points considered exhuming and relocating his remains due to the disruption to neighboring graves. His actual headstone has been stolen and replaced multiple times. Jeff Buckley was cremated after he accidentally drowned on May 29, 1997, at age 30 in the Wolf River Harbor near Memphis, Tennessee. The singer-songwriter, whose recording of Hallelujah became one of the most covered songs in modern music history, left no public burial site. His ashes were given to his mother, Mary Guibert, who has maintained them privately since 1997. The musician whose voice is heard on millions of recordings every year has no grave, no stone, and no public location where his name appears on the ground. Heath Ledger was buried at Karrakatta Cemetery in Perth, Western Australia, after he died on January 22, 2008, at age 28 from an accidental overdose of prescription medications. His family requested that the specific location within the cemetery not be publicly promoted to prevent mass pilgrimages to the site. The section of Karrakatta where he was interred is not marked with his name on the cemetery's public directories. His posthumous Academy Award for The Joker was accepted by his family at an empty seat where he would have sat. Anton Yelchin was buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Hollywood, California, after he died on June 19, 2016, at age 27 when his Jeep Grand Cherokee rolled backward and pinned him against a brick pillar in his Studio City driveway. Though interred at Hollywood Forever, his family requested that the specific grave location not be promoted in the cemetery's public-facing materials. The Star Trek Chekhov actor's grave is present, but deliberately kept from the cemetery maps distributed to visitors. That's his family seeking to preserve the dignity of the site. Whitney Houston was buried at Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey, after she died on February 11, 2012, at age 48, from accidental drowning in a bathtub due to cocaine intoxication. The greatest voice of her generation was initially buried at Fairview with a measure of privacy, her family requesting that the cemetery not direct visitors to the specific plot. The grave exists and is now more widely known, but for the initial period following her burial, it was a location her family was attempting to protect from the scale of public attention that her name invariably drew. Paul Walker was cremated after he died on November 30, 2013, at age 40 in a car crash in Valencia, California. The Fast and the Furious star's ashes were scattered near his home in Santa Barbara. No public grave exists, no headstone, no plot. The franchise to which he gave 10 years of his career continued his character's story in Furious 7, with a farewell sequence that reduced audiences to tears, an elaborate public memorial for a man who left no physical place in the ground where grief could go. Sharon Tate was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California, after she was murdered on August 9, 1969, at age 26 by members of the Manson family at her rented home on Cielo Drive. Her original burial location was deliberately kept from the public for years following her murder, her family fearing that the site would be targeted by Manson sympathizers or become morbid spectacle. And the grave is now more accessible, but the family's original instinct, to hide her from the world that had allowed her to be taken, shaped how the burial was handled from the beginning. Freddie Mercury was cremated after he died on November 24, 1991, at age 45 from bronchopneumonia caused by AIDS. His closest friend Mary Austin was entrusted with his ashes, and their location has never been publicly disclosed. It is widely believed she scattered them at Lake Geneva in Switzerland, where Mercury had maintained a home in his final years. But Austin has never confirmed this and has kept the location private for more than 3 decades. The most extravagant performer in rock history left no public address in the ground. Graham Parsons was the subject of one of the strangest burial stories in music history. After he died on September 19, 1973, at age 26 from a drug and alcohol overdose in Joshua Tree, California, his road manager and a friend stole his body from Los Angeles International Airport before it could be flown to Louisiana for burial. They drove it to Joshua Tree National Monument and attempted to cremate it with 5 gallons of gasoline in the desert. His partially burned remains were then shipped to Louisiana and buried at Garden of Memories Cemetery in Metairie. His family grave marker bears his full name, Ingram Cecil Connor III, which most fans do not know. Kirsty MacColl was buried at St. Endelian Church in Cornwall, England, after she died on December 18, 2000, at age 41, when she was struck by a motorboat while snorkeling off Cozumel, Mexico. The voice of Fairy Tale of New York was buried in the quiet Cornish churchyard her family had connections to, far from the London music scene that had known her name. Her grave in the small rural churchyard carries no celebrity designation and no indication to passing visitors that the woman buried there was responsible for one of the most beloved Christmas songs in the English language. Nick Drake was buried at the churchyard of St. Mary Magdalene in Tanworth in Arden, Warwickshire, England, after he died on November 25, 1974, at age 26 from an overdose of amitriptyline. He was virtually unknown at the time of his death, having sold fewer than 5,000 copies of his 3 albums during his lifetime. His grave in the small village churchyard was tended for decades by family, while his music accumulated the posthumous recognition that his life had been denied. His headstone now reads, "Now we rise and we are everywhere," a lyric from his song, From the Morning. Lenny Bruce was buried at Eden Memorial Park in Mission Hills, California, after he died on August 3, 1966, at age 40, from an accidental heroin overdose at his Hollywood Hills home. The comedian, who had been arrested dozens of times for obscenity and whose convictions were only posthumously overturned, left a grave that went largely without fanfare for years. His burial without ceremony matched the way he had lived, as a man whose importance the surrounding culture refused to acknowledge until it was too late, and all it had left was the ground. Stevie Ray Vaughan was buried at Laurel Land Memorial Park in Dallas, Texas, after he died on August 27, 1990, at age 35, when the helicopter carrying him from Alpine Valley Music Theater in Wisconsin crashed in dense fog shortly after takeoff. The greatest blues guitarist of his generation left a marked but modest grave in Dallas that was initially relatively unknown. The music world was still processing the shock of his loss when he was buried, and his grave for years did not reflect the scale of what had been taken from the world with him. Boon was cremated after he died on December 22, 1985, at age 27 in a van accident near Tucson, Arizona, when he was thrown from the vehicle while asleep in the back. The Minutemen guitarist was one of the most original voices in American punk. His work on Double Nickels on the Dime, a cornerstone of 1980s underground music. His ashes were given to his family in San Pedro, California, no public grave established. The musician whose influence ran through the entire generation of alternative rock left no ground to visit, no name on a stone.